Welcome to How to Paint a Portrait in 30 Minutes. So this is a real-time painting tutorial. There will be no edits, no cuts, no fast forward. This is straight up 30 minutes to paint a portrait. So what you see here is a cotton canvas panel. That's a cotton canvas that is mounted onto a panel. 9 by 12 inches, and it was toned a neutral gray acrylic color prior to painting. And what you see here is the silhouette of the face done all with one mass. So this is a warm gray mixture, and the paint has a little bit of spiked lavender oil and safflower oil mixed into it. We will be utilizing the wet on wet painting technique, that is alla prima approach. Please feel free to paint along with me using the final painting as a reference. Please disregard any need for a photo reference, as what we want to do as painters is create paintings and not copy photographs. So you see the silhouette for the eye socket, the cheekbone, and dare I say, a little bit for the chin. There is enough paint on that shape that we can paint light or dark onto it, and we're going to mix a little bit of something dark to put onto it. So black, alizarin, crimson, and a little bit of, let's just say, a middle brownish color. And now we're putting a dark shape around the top of the head. And we're just going to follow all around the corners of the side of the head. Now we have decided that the model is going to be in a 3/4 position, meaning we're going to be seeing more of the model's left side than the model's right side. And now you see how using the wet on wet painting technique, we can just kind of blend the colors away towards the inside of the face. We chose a warm gray tone because these warm gray tones will be ideal to build light warm colors and cool dark colors along with cool warm colors. Now this is just black, raw umber, and a little bit of alizarin. Now this is going to give us our approximation for the eyebrow. Please disregard any need for a photo reference. Simply look at the face as thirds. So from the top of the hairline to the eyebrow is 1/3. From the bottom of the eyebrow to the, let's just say, the top of the bottom of the nose to make it oh so confusing, that's going to be another third, and then from the nose to the chin is going to be another third. And right below the eyebrows, of course, will lie a shape for the eyes. And this is quite simple. You could put this shape closer to the eyebrows or a little bit further away from the eyebrows, but just make sure that you don't put it too far down. Now you see we're starting to kind of guess where the upper eyelid is going to land. Now we're using the outline to draw the corner of the cheekbone just a little bit. And now using the wet on wet painting technique, we can let this shape flow. And this gives us remarkable control over the value range. Now very carefully we're sketching the bottom of the nose. The reason I present this exercise this way to you, and yes, I'm going to call it an exercise, is so that we can optimize the alla prima wet on wet painting approach to painting portraits such that we can create portraits in 30 minutes. Now we're using a little bit of dark for the eyes. And here's a little secret that you're going to want to know. When we're transitioning from the dark of the eyes to, say, the light of the side plane of the nose, more pressure with a dark shape makes it darker because you add more paint. Less pressure will make it lighter. And you'll see in just a second. Less pressure. Now you see that shape. It starts to get lighter. Less pressure makes it less light. And now for the next couple minutes, we are going to continue to draw. And as I'm putting these shapes down, it's important to mention that with this technique, this quick 30-minute technique, we have to be able to think on our feet, basically, with the proportions of the face in terms of where the shapes land. However, if you want to, you can carefully measure where you're going to put the eyes, the nose, and the mouth if you are more, let's just say, concerned about the likeness of the model. So likeness, mostly what it pertains to is the accurate depiction of light and shadow. So in its most elemental form, likeness can be achieved with just two tones. So if that is your concern, then spend more time with that. But it's important to differentiate the portrait as fine art versus the portrait as a commission. A commission is more commercial in the sense that you're painting something for a client that wants a picture to look a certain way. Essentially, it is turning our skills and capabilities into kind of just like another filter on an app. So consider that the portrait as fine art doesn't have every single thing to do with exactly where you position the shapes of the face. Rather, it has more to do with consideration to form, value, color relationships, and of course, as you're seeing here today, paint handling techniques. And now we're painting some darker shapes for the eyebrows. We still haven't added too much color yet. And these dark shapes that we're adding here are going to be pretty much set in stone, the darkest shapes that we're going to have, and we're going to basically blur everything around it. Now we're starting to add some color, so allow me to explain the color to you. It is just a dark pink or a dark orange for the skin tones, and let's just call this one a dark pink. You can easily create this mixture with just burnt sienna, white, ultramarine blue, and a little bit of cadmium red, or you can use a cadmium red substitute if you don't want to use cadmium red. So now you see why the initial tone was a gray, a warm gray, because using this alla prima technique, we can paint warmer colors and blend them directly onto the cooler colors. Now this is a color that's not that different from that burnt sienna, white, ultramarine blue with a tad bit of cadmium red, or a cadmium substitute if you need, but it's a little darker. So it's a warm pink that gets darker, and that's really easy to achieve if you just add a little bit more of the black in the burnt sienna, white, ultramarine blue mixture. Black is, and if we're talking about ivory black, ivory black is a blue. It is a dark blue. So there is no such thing as a black oil paint because all of these colors have some type of hue. Even white. You can buy titanium white, which is more towards the blue, or you can buy lead white, which is more towards the warm colors. It's no different with buying either ivory black, which is a cool black, or Mars black, which is a warmer black. And you also have some different varieties like a chromatic black. So think about that. It's not just black and white, essentially. There are hues there. Now a little bit of white and ultramarine blue with a tad bit of skin tone is what was used to mix the color for the sclera. Now using the alla prima technique where we're painting directly onto a wet layer of paint, you apply less pressure to make the value darker as you move closer to the border of the form boundary. So the border of the form boundary on the forehead has been clearly delineated there, right on the edge of the face. And it's the same with the sclera, the white of the eyes, and it's the same with the edge of the wing of the nose. Basically, the corner of any form that has curvature in the light is going to have a slightly darker value, assuming we are using just a single light source. Now using the wet on wet method, we are adding pink on top of the cheekbone area, which is a darker value than we initially want to go to. This is mixing directly on top of the wet gray paint. So less pressure makes it a different color. Using this technique, we can paint a shape darker using wet on wet and then add a lighter value on top of it, applying less pressure to create gradations of form, color, value on the cheekbones. And we can do that with every single form that has curvature. Now I didn't want to start this dark initially because I wanted to be able to see my outlines. But the same concept holds true. We could have started the initial shape for the face with a darker value, darker, warmer value like this, and then added the lights. But that would have made the outlines a little more difficult to see. As you can see here, the outlines are not as distinguished anymore. Once again, this is a mixture that is no more complicated than burnt sienna, white, ultramarine blue, and to make it a little bit more yellow, we can throw in a yellow ochre. A fun tip, when it comes to painting skin tones, there are so many palettes out there. The most famous one is the Zorn palette. Zorn, Z-O-R-N palette. If you haven't heard of it, it is a simple 4-color palette, which is white, yellow ochre, cadmium red, and black. In antiquity, it was lead white, vermilion for red, yellow ochre, and a carbon black. But the same concept holds true. All it is a way to create an orangey pink or a darker, let's say, red. And everything in between can be accomplished with different layers of warm grays. So don't stress out too much over skin tones. Let color be something that you just react to naturally. Focus on placement of your planes. And now you see how we added the light over top of the dark, blending away at the forms. And we're adding a middle value to the side plane of the nose. Though, had I put my initial dark values in perfectly, which of course I'm only human, I'm not perfect, had I put them in perfectly, then we would have had that value on the nose right away. But it only takes less than a minute to apply a different shape. Now we're adding the darks back onto the form that we just added. So basically this is kind of repeating steps that we did earlier when we add the dark back to the face, let's just say on the eyes. This is something new. Now we're adding some lighter planes. So again, less pressure makes it less bright. Once again, this is a color that's easily achieved with light yellow mixtures such as yellow ochre, titanium white, and a hint of burnt sienna. Start with the lightest area and then slowly blend away downwards to create a gradation of value, essentially finishing off that side plane of the cheek. And we'll do the same with the forehead. Now this is what accelerates the process. Now creating a portrait in 30 minutes is a very difficult thing to ask anybody to do, especially with oil paint. So every single one of the steps here is important because it builds upon the final result with very little back and forth. And when there is back and forth, just like we did with the eyes, I will mention it. Now there's the light on the cheekbone. Less pressure makes it less bright. So this eliminates the need for you to have to do so many mixtures on your palette. Color is not important here. And we could have just left it here. 20 minutes in, a portrait in 20 minutes is an excellent exercise in paint handling, planes, and values. Once again, there are no mineral spirits used in this process. All that was used in the beginning was safflower oil and spike lavender. This is going to be important to this process. You can use mineral spirits if you want to thin out the paint, especially if you want to continue working on this painting for several days, or shall I say several layers. But if you want to follow this process exactly the way that it's being demonstrated for you, you need nothing more than safflower oil to thin out the paint in the beginning, but there is no more medium added to the paint. The rest is just the thickness of the paint. Oil paint itself already has a generous amount of linseed oil, unless you buy oil paints that have other mediums in there, like safflower oil or walnut oil. Either case, oil paints have enough oil in them. And please, always use a drying oil when you're painting. Do not use a oil that does not dry. So a couple little extra shapes there for the eye. Once again, some back and forth going on there. I'm only human. I'm just going back and forth with the light of the eye, kind of figuring out how I want them to curve around. And this is the final 7 minutes. So by no means should you panic and restrict yourself to painting only 30 minutes, but rather what I'm presenting to you is a very efficient, dare I say, the fastest way that you can create a portrait painting with oil paints, using the wet on wet approach and minimizing the need for so much color mixing and drawing, letting the paint handling techniques determine the process. And remember that the canvas was toned a neutral gray color using acrylic paint. You can use any acrylic paint to tone as long as it is an artist grade, such as Golden Brand, Liquitex, or even Artist Loft does just fine, and you can get that in Michaels, or you can just order any acrylic paint from Amazon, and there will be links in the description box for you to check out the materials. And for these studies, these exercises, choose your acrylic tone for the background ahead of time. If you want the tone of the background to be something different, choose that ahead of time, because you want to eliminate the need to have to do extra work in the background for these exercises. These are exercises. In a full painting, the background is, dare I say, more important than the foreground. As you've seen in some of my live streams, most of the time I actually go in with the background before I paint the model. But once again, this is an exercise in portrait painting. Perhaps the fastest and most efficient way to paint a portrait in oil paint. So let's summarize what was needed to create this study. Materials-wise, quite simple. All you need is a cotton canvas. It could be a stretched canvas or mounted on a panel, doesn't matter, as long as it's a cotton canvas. You need to tone your canvas with acrylic paint, whichever value you want. I chose to go with a neutral gray. Your color palette needs to not be any more complicated than burnt sienna white, ultramarine blue, and you can throw in yellow ochre, cadmium red, and ivory black as extras. The layering method only requires safflower oil. You don't need to add the spike lavender if you don't want to. I just add it in there because it makes the safflower oil a little bit thinner. Only apply as much oil as is needed to the paint to get it to spread for that initial shape. Then follow the steps that were outlined for you here, or demonstrated for you here, going in with the drawing, the darkest darks, and then modeling the form, putting in the darker mid-tone first, and then adding the light into the darker midtone. The trick is how much pressure you apply to the paintbrush to create the gradations. That is going to be what will accelerate your painting process. And after doing a couple of these, you will notice that your paint handling will increase. And again, don't worry too much about something like exact likeness, as that is more of a commercial thing, and we want to focus on the portrait as fine art. And that's pretty much everything. And again, this is an exercise in the fastest way to create an oil painting. The entire demonstration has been filmed in real time, so there is no editing. If you find that the video is too slow for you, YouTube has options of having the video play faster for you if you want to. If the video is too fast, feel free to pause the video at any moment. If you do decide to paint along with this video, please help support the channel by liking, subscribing, and when you post to any social medias, please use the hashtag #UpariArtist. And most importantly, don't forget, have fun with this, and don't think of it as an exact copy of a photograph. Let the painting be a painting. And these are the last little touches here that will apply to this painting. So there you have it. Perhaps the fastest way to create a portrait painting using oil paint. Take care, and I'll see you on the next one.